Why are you speaking to my daughter? Harrison Blackwood's deep voice cut through the garden like a blade. At 42, the pharmaceutical magnate commanded respect with his imposing frame and tailored suit. His blue eyes narrowed at the scene before him, a black man in worn work clothes kneeling beside his 8-year-old daughter under the sprawling oak tree. Thomas Reed, 36, stood slowly, brushing soil from his hands. No one knew this humble gardener had been a professor of cognitive linguistics at Princeton before his wife's medical bills had stripped him of everything. "I apologize, Mr. Blackwood. I was just—" "You were just what?" Harrison interrupted, striding forward. "Sophia hasn't spoken a word in 3 years, not one, and now I find you filling her head with what exactly?" The little girl remained seated on the grass, a colorful book open on her lap. Her eyes sparkled with an intelligence Thomas had recognized immediately, not disability, but brilliance seeking the right channel. "I was just tending the roses, sir. She approached me," Thomas said, partially truthful. For weeks, he'd noticed how Sophia reacted when he hummed phrases in different languages while working. Yesterday, she'd whispered, "Bonjour," so softly he almost missed it. Harrison snatched the book, a children's story in German, from his daughter's hands. "Where did this come from?" "From your library, sir. I found it while pruning near the window." "And you thought my daughter was your experiment?" Harrison's voice rose dangerously. "She has severe developmental delays. She doesn't speak, doesn't engage, doesn't learn. 3 specialists from Johns Hopkins confirmed it." Thomas felt a familiar fire ignite within him, not anger, recognition. He'd seen that same spark in countless children labeled as unreachable by those who couldn't see beyond conventional boundaries. "With respect, Mr. Blackwood," Thomas said, his voice steady, "sometimes children simply need to be heard in the language that makes sense to them." Harrison laughed coldly. "You, a gardener, are lecturing me about my own daughter? About a child you've known for what, 2 months?" "Not lecturing," Thomas replied, kneeling again beside Sophia, "just offering possibilities." That's when it happened. Sophia looked up, met her father's eyes directly, and whispered words that made Harrison freeze. "Ich mag Blumen, Papa." The silence that followed felt eternal. Harrison blinked rapidly. She spoke German. Thomas nodded, unable to hide his satisfaction. "Children like Sophia aren't broken, Mr. Blackwood. They just communicate differently than we expect." Harrison stared at his daughter, then at Thomas, then back at Sophia, who was now turning pages with genuine interest for the first time in years. There was life in his little girl's eyes. "How did you know?" Harrison whispered, his arrogance momentarily replaced by confusion. Thomas smiled, not in triumph, but with the quiet confidence of someone who held transformative secrets. "Let's just say I've been on both sides of this conversation before." In that sunlit garden of a mansion where wealth had purchased everything but understanding, a man everyone overlooked had planted the first seed of a transformation no one could have anticipated. The next morning, Harrison summoned Thomas to his mahogany-paneled office. Awards and charity photos lined the walls, trophies of his public benevolence. "I need to clarify something," Harrison began without offering Thomas a seat. "What happened yesterday was coincidence. Sophia occasionally makes sounds. It doesn't mean anything." Thomas stood quietly, hands clasped before him. "I want you to maintain your distance," Harrison continued. "Focus exclusively on the outer gardens. Jackson will handle the areas where Sophia plays." If he only knew, Thomas thought. If Harrison knew about his doctorate from Princeton, his 22 published papers on neurodivergent communication patterns, his groundbreaking research on multilingual approaches to selective mutism. And to be perfectly clear, Harrison leaned forward, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Sophia is severely impaired. The top neurologists in the country confirmed it. She won't speak normally. She won't have a normal life. Each word was calculated to wound, but Thomas maintained his composure, thinking of the 37 hopeless cases who now thrived in universities worldwide. "I understand your concern, sir." "Concern?" Harrison scoffed. "It's not concern, it's reality, and I won't have my daughter used as an experiment by unqualified people." That afternoon, while pruning roses in the far corner of the estate, Thomas heard footsteps approaching. It was Dr. Natalie Rivera, the family's pediatrician, looking around cautiously. "I need to speak with you about Sophia," she said quietly. "Yesterday, when she spoke German, it was her first spontaneous communication in 3 years." Thomas set down his shears. "Is something wrong?" "On the contrary. I've been practicing medicine for 18 years. I know when a child is responding to specific stimuli versus making random sounds." Thomas's heart quickened. "And what do you think happened?" "Do you have background in special education?" Dr. Rivera asked directly. Thomas hesitated. The truth could change everything or destroy his only chance to help Sophia. "Dr. Rivera, if I told you I have a PhD in cognitive linguistics and spent 7 years researching communication patterns in neurodivergent children, what would you do with that information?" The doctor's eyes widened. "You have a doctorate?" "Princeton University. My dissertation focused on multilingual approaches to selective mutism. I've published 22 papers in peer-reviewed journals." "My God," she whispered, leaning against a tree. "What is a linguistics professor doing cutting roses?" "Life happens, doctor. My wife's cancer treatment drained our savings. After she passed, I needed work, any work." Dr. Rivera studied him intently. "And Sophia? Can you help her?" "She's not severely impaired as diagnosed. She shows characteristics of selective mutism combined with sensory processing differences. Her father treats her like she's broken, so she shut down completely." "How can you be so certain?" 37 similar cases, doctor. In my research, I worked with children given identical diagnoses. Today, 32 of them communicate fluently in multiple languages. Dr. Rivera was silent for a long moment. "Harrison wants to increase her medication. He says she's regressing." "She's not regressing, she's awakening. For the first time in years, she's found communication that resonates with her." The doctor handed him a business card. "My private number. If you're willing to help this child, I'll provide medical support, but we'll need to be discreet." That night, while Harrison attended a fundraising gala, Thomas did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He called his former department chair. "Professor Daniels, it's Thomas Reed." A stunned silence followed. "Thomas, where have you been? Your research was cited at the International Cognitive Science Conference last month." "I'm in a temporary situation, but I need a favor. My intervention protocols for selective mutism." What Thomas didn't know was that Jackson, the head groundskeeper, had overheard parts of this conversation and would report it to Harrison the next day. Meanwhile, in her bedroom, Sophia was examining a book about animals with names in 7 languages. A book a certain former professor had deliberately left near her favorite swing. "Katze, chat, gato, neko," she whispered, each word like music to her ears. The next morning, Jackson knocked on Harrison's office door, his expression a mixture of urgency and malice. "Mr. Blackwood, there's something you should know about the new gardener." Harrison looked up impatiently. "What is it?" "Last night I heard him on the phone talking about research papers in cognitive science. He called himself a professor." Harrison's expression darkened. "Professor?" "Yes, sir. And he mentioned something about cases like Miss Sophia's. I think he's lying about who he is." 15 minutes later, Thomas entered the office to find Harrison standing behind his desk, laptop open, expression thunderous. "Sit down," Harrison commanded. Thomas complied, maintaining his composure. "You lied to me." Harrison turned the laptop toward Thomas, displaying Princeton University's faculty archive with Dr. Thomas Reed's impressive academic profile. "I never lied, Mr. Blackwood. I simply didn't volunteer information that wasn't requested." "Not requested." Harrison slammed his fist down. "You led me to believe you were just an uneducated gardener when you're a doctor of linguistics specializing in children like Sophia." "Would it have mattered?" Thomas asked calmly. "From day one, you made it clear I was invisible, that my job was to tend plants, not have opinions." Before Harrison could respond, the door burst open and Sophia ran in, followed by Dr. Rivera. "Thomas," Sophia exclaimed in English, then switched to Spanish. "Me gustan las flores," then to Japanese. "Hana ga daisuki desu." Harrison stood frozen as his daughter, silent for 3 years, switched fluently between languages. Dr. Rivera approached with a tablet. "Harrison, you need to see this." The video showed Sophia counting in French, reciting poetry in Italian, and naming animals in Mandarin. 7 languages, Dr. Rivera explained. In 3 weeks, she's not only speaking but understanding complex grammatical structures. Her cognitive abilities are extraordinary. Harrison stared at his daughter, then at Thomas, then back at the videos. How is this possible? Because she was never severely impaired. Thomas replied, kneeling beside Sophia. She has selective mutism triggered by trauma and emotional isolation. When she found safe communication that resonated with her, she blossomed naturally. Sophia turned to her father and looked directly into his eyes. "Daddy," she said clearly, "Thomas says I'm smart." Then she switched to German. Sagt, ich bin besonders." Harrison felt tears forming. His daughter, whom he'd protected as broken, stood before him speaking with eloquence he'd never imagined possible. "Sophia," he whispered, kneeling down. "You could always talk?" "Yes, Daddy, but you looked sad when I tried, so I stopped." She switched to French. "Mais Thomas m'écoute." The silence that followed was profound. Harrison looked at Thomas, whose expression held no triumph, only compassion. "I didn't know," Harrison murmured. "I truly didn't know." "I know you didn't," Thomas replied gently. "But now you do. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge?" Dr. Rivera placed her hand on Harrison's shoulder. "Sophia needs to continue with Thomas. Her progress is remarkable, but interrupting now would be devastating." Harrison watched his daughter arranging colored blocks while counting in Russian, then looked at Thomas, who had transformed his home without his knowledge. "I need to apologize," Harrison said, voice breaking. "And I need to ask you to stay, not as a gardener, but as Sophia's teacher." Thomas smiled, not in victory, but with the quiet joy of someone who sees a child finally being recognized for who she truly is. "I'll stay, on one condition. Sophia isn't a miracle or a success story. She's a brilliant child who needs to be loved for who she is, not what she can do." As Harrison nodded in understanding, Sophia took both men's hands. "Daddy and Thomas," she said in Portuguese, "are we a family now?" In that moment, 3 lives changed forever, proving that sometimes the greatest transformations begin not with grand gestures, but with the simple act of truly seeing someone for the first time.